Hey everyone, thank you for joining me. So today I decided on something I've been wanting to do for quite a while, and I'm going to be doing it on my favorite Colt steel, the 8010. I think this is probably one of their best models. Now I do have replacement scales from Original Goat. This is the milled aluminum version here. They do have titanium as well, but for 80 bucks, I think these are totally worth it. Again, don't really have an issue aesthetically or quality-wise with the original goat scales. The only issue I have is that they're pretty slick, so they're pretty slippery. And I was thinking, okay, so how do I make them a little bit more grippy? And I was thinking of doing a texture that I don't really do that often, but I think it would look really, really cool. And I'm going to give you guys a little example here. So let's see if I can get this in camera. But you guys can see right here, you have kind of a shifting starburst texture, almost like tree bark, but it gives it a flash of light off of each little indentation. Really, really love this texture. Again, I don't do it that often, but this is on brass. I did do a fresh version, so you guys can see what it looks like fresh, but it just has a really cool effect in the light. And I also did a fresh piece of aluminum, since I'll be doing aluminum here. But you can see right there, same effect, just really trippy. And one thing I found, or I attempted it, kind of around a starting point. So to go around a circular starting point, I know I'm repeating myself, but basically, I'll just use this as an example. So what I'm going to do is go around the pivot point as my starting point and kind of go in a ray around that pivot. And we'll dive further into it before I actually start putting the texture on. And this is going to be a step-by-step. I'm going to take you along as I go through it, and hopefully you guys enjoy it. And if you like it, you guys can attempt it yourselves. But I'm going to show you what tools I use to achieve this effect. Before I begin, obviously I'm going to take this thing apart. And once I do that, then I'm going to show you the next step, kind of a guideline using a marker. I like to use a Sharpie, and I'm going to show you guys how I lay out my guidelines, and then we'll go from there. All right, so I went ahead and disassembled the knife. I'm going to give you guys a close look at Original Goat's work. I love that they do really, really clean CNC work. So you can see they put their logo, USA made, and the element for aluminum. Just beautifully done. I love that you can see the track or the path of the CNCing. Again, these scales are a little on the slick side. I believe you can get textures on their website, but I went ahead and got the slick ones because I did have something in mind similar to this project. So again, just beautifully done. Love their work. And the tool I'm going to be using, basically the whole thing is going to be done with this Dremel and a cutting disc. Now, if you get cutting discs in a Dremel kit, you have the black ones, which are the thinnest, but then you also have a red disc set. It's a little bit thicker than this, but I like to use the thinner just because when you're doing it by hand, your hand tends to kind of move a little bit, so it'll keep it on the smaller side. Because if you use the thicker stuff, then that groove gets a little too large, and I mean, it still looks good. I don't personally like it. But again, the kit comes with a bunch of replacements, and I'm sure if you guys have used these before, you guys know they shatter if they barely touch anything. So that's why I have a lot extra. So basically, what I'm going to do right now is take my marker, take a Sharpie, take an ink pen. This is a fine tip pen. And I'll take a flexible, anything that's flat and has a straight line, something that's flexible, just because these scales are contoured. But what I'm going to do is use that pivot as my starting point. And what I like to do is start with one point. I kind of like to go towards a point that you can see. So I'm going to go towards the end of this point at the top of the scale and starting from the center of this pivot. Really quick, show you what I do. Now again, you just want to use these as guides. It's a huge help. I mean, you can wing it without using guides, but I highly recommend guides or guidelines with a marker. Makes life easier. So as you can see right there, a nice straight line. And now what I'm going to do is just create a star pattern off of the center of the pivot. So I'm going to finish that and then I'll pick up from there. All right, so my guidelines are all finished. And as you can see, I went in that starburst pattern using the pivot as my center. And then all I did was copy the lines onto the other scale. Took a little bit of time, but again, this is going to be a huge help in the long run. And just so you guys know, this is a pretty time-consuming process. So I'm definitely going to be taking breaks here and there. But again, it's just going to be a lot of little touches or taps with the cutting wheel. And again, I'm going to go through the steps just so you guys can get a better understanding of how I approach this. I'm sure there's other ways to do this, but if all you have is a Dremel and some time, this will get the job done. Safety first, as always. I'm going to wear just a mask just because aluminum is not good to breathe in. I will have a fan going to blow the dust away, and then obviously some safety glasses since I only have 2 eyes and I don't want to lose them. What I'm going to do is take my Dremel and I'm just going to tap on these lines a little by little. And I'm going to just do one of these lines and explain kind of what I did and what it should look like. So let's get to it. All right, so I went ahead and finished up one line. As you guys can see, you get that really cool effect. And it doesn't look like much now, but the more you fill in, the more it'll stand out. Basically what I do is I just do, you can kind of see at the front here. So I'll do one little tap, or I'll touch one section. And it's not much of the cutting disc. It's just a quick, let me see if I can get this on camera. So it's just a quick tap, and then I move in front of it and I tap, and then I just continue touching the first one I did just a little bit and then extending off of that. And I'm not going too deep. That's one thing to keep in mind. You don't have to go crazy deep to get this effect. As you can see, it's very minor, but it goes a long way. So what I'm going to do now is do all the guidelines, and then once I get that done, I'll show you exactly what I do from there. All right, so I went ahead and finished both scales, just doing my first guidelines. So as you can see right there. And same with the other side. Now, once I do my first guidelines, I'll do another set. So you guys can see in between those other ones. So I'll just kind of eyeball it. It doesn't have to be perfect since this pattern hides a lot of imperfections. So you can slip up here and there as long as you don't go too deep. But as you guys can see, I didn't go all the way to the center with my second guidelines because you don't want that ink to go in your first set. And the reason you don't want the ink to go in there is it's really difficult to clean out. Then you actually have to use the tool again to clean out those little marks. So I just get as close as I can, as you can see right there. And then that way it doesn't go into those little grooves that I created. But after the second guidelines, I don't do any more guidelines. You can if you choose, just be careful with the ink. But I will just eyeball it. And as you guys can see right here, since these distances are so short, I can just eyeball it to the end. And another thing to keep in mind, this is something I like to do, as you guys can see the beveled edges all the way around the scale. I like to just go a hair over it. I don't like to go into the bevel just because when you're finished with it, it'll feel really comfortable in hand and you won't have any weird sharp edges. What I'm going to do is finish the closer sections all the way around just so you guys can get a little taste of what the finished product will look like. And personally, when I'm not recording and doing this for myself, I like to do the shorter sections first and then save the long sections for last, just because those really take up some time and you're going to want to take some breaks every now and then. And another thing I want to do for you guys is I'm going to do my best to get a close-up of how I get this texture with the Dremel. So I'm going to bring you guys a lot closer to the table, and hopefully I can get it on camera for you guys. Alright, so here is a majority of the front finished. And as you guys can see, the effect that this texture has, it's just really, really neat. Almost looks like it's moving. And once it's fully complete, you guys will see the full effect. But almost done. Again, very time consuming, but this will turn out really, really cool. And then obviously you got to finish the second one. So what I'm going to do is finish all of it, and then I'll show you the next step after everything is complete. Alright, so here they are all finished up. Really pleased with them. You guys can see the full effect now. Shifts in the light. Definitely makes it look like it's moving. Now, since I used the cutoff wheel to create these little indents or these little grooves, there are some sharp edges. So what I'm going to do is hit it with some 1000 grit, just lightly. Nothing crazy, just to knock down those little sharp bits. And that's pretty much it. So I'm going to do some final touches to the blade and the lock bar. I'm going to etch and stone wash everything, just so there's a good contrast between the aluminum finish and then the dark wash with the blade and all the other little touches. And I'm going to see you guys back up in the studio. So we're back up here in the studio. It's a lot more quiet up here. We don't have to deal with any of the shop noise. But let's take a close look at the scales. Start off with the show side. And as you guys can see, that effect is just really, I don't know the exact word for it, but it's very hypnotizing. It really makes you want to hold it in the light, just kind of tilt it round and round. And even up and down on this longer section, you do kind of get a kind of a waterfall effect. You know, just a really cool shift. I really like this texture. And again, I don't do this texture too often because, as you guys can tell, very, very time consuming. But I think it's totally worth it. Again, took a lot of breaks just because those little motions with the wrist really adds up on the wrist. Definitely recommend breaks if you are doing this, but really happy with the outcome. Again, these are original goat scales. I think they do beautiful, beautiful work. And I went ahead and etched and stonewashed the blade, but something interesting happened up here. I'm not too upset about it since it's kind of a two-tone finish. Again, wasn't trying to achieve that, but I think it came out pretty cool. So it is stonewashed. I do like that the cutting edge, or the cutting bevel, is dark and stonewashed. Gave it a fresh, aggressive edge. And then, I also heat anodized all the hardware and the thumb studs just to get them darker and have some contrast against that really bright aluminum texture. Went ahead and did the back spacer as well, and then the pocket clip too. And I went ahead and stonewashed the back spacer. This is aluminum, it's coated, but I just wanted it to have an aggressive finish, just like everything else. And that's pretty much it. So let's assemble it and see what it looks like all put together. So here it is all assembled. And again, I just created some contrast on the hardware. It's not too even, but I can go over it again just to make it perfect. But just wanted to get it done for video purposes. Future me here. So I went ahead and changed up some things to the final look of this knife. So I went ahead and added a satin finish for the hardware that goes on top of the pocket clip. So you can see there a satin finish to match the aluminum. And then I went ahead and put a satin finish on the thumb studs. And the steps that you can see on the thumb stud, I went ahead and left that heat anodized look just to have contrast on the thumb studs. But this is the look I thought would look best with it. And I just went ahead and really quickly touched up those things to get a finished look. I need to do this more often on not only aluminum, but some titanium. I do it on brass most of the time, but I think it looks good with any metal. But I am curious to see what it would look like on titanium and then anodized. So that'll probably be a future project here soon. But the action is just as good. Again, these are very, very well made by Original Goat. I know I keep saying that, but just want to let you guys know that they do quality work. But again, there is the blade with that contrast. And again, I left the edges alone. I didn't want to go too far off the bevel, just so that it's more comfortable in hand. And this is definitely a lot more grippy in hand. It's not as slick as it used to be. So I think I definitely accomplished that. Got rid of that slippery surface. But as always, let me know down below what you guys think of how this thing turned out. And if you guys are interested in some Original Goat scales, I will leave a link down below in the description. You guys can pick up either the aluminum, textured aluminum, or titanium. As always, you guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate the support. And I will see you guys on the next one.